She was their tiny warrior. She was born 8 weeks too soon, defied the odds from the very first moments of her life. Her mother, brothers, and sister adored her. She was the heartbeat of their family, a little bundle of joy and resilience. But on one horrific night, as her loved ones lay in the comfort of dreams, their world was shattered in the most unimaginable way. Something unthinkable happened to this defenseless little darling. Today, I must share a story that is as haunting as it is heartbreaking. Before we proceed, I need to warn you. This case includes disturbing and graphic details. If you have a sensitive heart, please listen with caution. The man responsible for little girls' suffering was a true master of deception. He had spent years living a double life, convincing everyone around him that he was someone he wasn't. But his lies and hidden nature would eventually unravel, exposing the horrors he had inflicted upon the most vulnerable among us. This is the story of a predator cloaked in innocence, a nightmare no one could have seen coming. It's about Emmalee Barringer. Emmalee Barringer was born on the sacred holiday of Thanksgiving in 2015, arriving 8 weeks earlier than expected. Her mother, Amanda Adkins, was overjoyed to welcome her precious little girl, who immediately captured the hearts of everyone around her. Emmalee's bright, charming smile was contagious, and she quickly became the light of her family's life. Despite her early arrival, Emmalee was a calm and content baby, rarely crying, and always seeming to radiate joy. Her sweetness and cheerful disposition made her a source of happiness for her family, especially her mother, who adored her with every ounce of her being. Her family fondly described her as the little warrior who, despite being born prematurely, never stopped fighting and always seemed to have a sense of peace around her, like she was a little angel sent from above. Emmalee Barringer was not only adored by her mother, Amanda, but also by her 3 older brothers and sister. She loved to play and spend time with her siblings, 7-year-old Nathaniel, 6-year-old Carly, and 2-year-old Cameron. Emmalee's bond with her family was strong, and her cheerful nature made her the perfect playmate. By the time she turned 10 months old, Emmalee was beginning to take her first steps, eagerly exploring the world around her. She had just started babbling her first words, delighting her family with each new sound and milestone. Her life was full of promise, and her future seemed as bright and joyful as her personality. In the summer of 2016, Emmalee's mother, Amanda Adkins, made a life-changing decision. She realized that the life they had in Maryland, on the outskirts of Baltimore, was no longer the best or safest place for her children to grow up. With a heavy heart, Amanda decided to leave behind the familiar and start fresh. She packed up her children and moved to West Virginia, hoping to build a new, safer life away from the struggles they faced in Baltimore. Amanda dreamed of a better future for her kids, one where they could flourish in a peaceful and nurturing environment. Almost immediately after moving to West Virginia, Amanda met a man named Benjamin Taylor, better known to everyone as Benji. His charm was undeniable. He seemed to have this magnetic presence, and it didn't take long for Amanda to fall for him. Benji captured her heart in a way no one had before, leaving her smitten and eager to build a future together. To Amanda, Benji seemed like the perfect man. He was always by her side, constantly hanging around, and eagerly joining in on family activities. He didn't just want to be around Amanda. He made it clear that he wanted to be part of her entire world. He was always with her and the children, sharing moments that should have been filled with love and safety. He quickly blended into their daily routine, acting as if he had always been an integral part of their family. His presence was comforting at first, making Amanda feel like she had finally found someone who truly cared for her and her children. Amanda was over the moon. She was completely smitten with Benji, seeing him as the man she had always dreamed of. To her, he was perfect, kind, loving, and attentive. It seemed like every moment with him was a dream come true. She had finally found her prince. In August 2016, Benji shared a photo on his Facebook page that seemed to confirm everything Amanda felt. It was a picture of him and Amanda sharing a kiss, a public display of their love that symbolized their growing relationship. To the outside world, it looked like a picture-perfect romance, Just days after sharing their love for the world to see, on September 7, 2016, Benji made a public declaration of his relationship with Amanda. He changed his Facebook status to "in a relationship with Amanda Adkins," proudly showing the world that they were together. To Amanda, this was yet another sign that everything was falling perfectly into place. But what she didn't know was that beneath Benji's charming exterior lay a criminal past, one that he had carefully hidden from her. Benji wasn't the man he appeared to be. He had a criminal record, with convictions for burglary. More troubling, he had violated the terms of his parole not once, but twice. His past was anything but clean, and yet he had managed to deceive everyone around him, including Amanda. Just a couple of months after meeting Amanda, Benji had moved in with her and her children, further entrenching himself in their lives. Everything seemed perfect on the surface, but the truth was far darker than anyone could have imagined. On the evening of October 2nd, Amanda and her 3 older children, Nathaniel, Carly, and Cameron, went to bed around 9 p.m., unaware that something would shatter their sense of security that night. Benji, however, stayed up a little longer, giving the impression that he was just going about his usual routine. While Amanda and the older children were already fast asleep, Benji didn't feel tired at all. Just like little Emily, who was still awake, he moved through the house with an unsettling calmness. At some point, Benji decided to take Emily downstairs with him, telling her that he was simply finishing up some laundry. But as he made his way to the basement, a place that should have been off limits, he brought Emily with him, continuing to act like everything was normal as he put on music and completed the laundry. The night passed without alarm, but around 4 a.m. in the morning, Amanda woke up and instinctively checked on Emily. She peered into her crib, but to her surprise, Emily was not there. And Benji, who should have been lying beside her, was nowhere to be found either. Confused and disoriented, Amanda couldn't understand where they had gone. At first, she assumed that maybe they had both fallen asleep somewhere downstairs. Benji perhaps on the couch, and Emily peacefully nestled in her swing, something she had done many times before. With growing concern, Amanda checked the living room and the rooms downstairs, but there was no sign of either Emily or Benji. As her anxiety began to rise, a thought crossed her mind. Benji had mentioned earlier that he would be doing laundry in the basement. As Amanda descended into the basement, she was met with a sight so horrific and unimaginable, it would stay with her forever. The dim lighting cast eerie shadows, and at first, Amanda couldn't fully comprehend what she was seeing. In the corner of the room, she saw Benji, half-dressed and in a position that made her blood run cold. It took a moment for Amanda to process the scene, as everything seemed too surreal, too wrong to be real. Stunned and overwhelmed, Amanda asked the one question that echoed in her mind. "What are you doing?" She could barely bring herself to speak the words, but Benji, unnervingly calm, replied as though nothing was wrong. He told her, in the most casual tone, that he was simply wiping Emily off. The words hung in the air, cold and inexplicable. Amanda, bewildered and horrified, asked, "Why in the world would you be doing that in the middle of the night, in the basement?" The question seemed to hang between them, but there was no good answer, no explanation that could justify what was happening. As Amanda moved closer to Benji and Emily, her heart pounded in her chest. But it was then that she noticed something was terribly wrong. The once innocent face of her daughter was smeared with blood, a sight that sent a shockwave through Amanda's very soul. Emily was making strange gurgling sounds, the kind that no mother should ever hear. And the worst of it was that her tiny body felt ice cold to the touch. It was a chilling sign that something was horribly, horribly wrong. With frantic speed, Amanda scooped her daughter into her arms, her heart breaking with every breath. In a fit of rage and disbelief, she slapped Benji across the face, screaming, "What have you done? What did you do to her?" Amanda dialed 911 with trembling hands, her voice breaking as she screamed through tears into the dispatcher's ear. "My daughter is bleeding. From down there." The urgency in her voice was unmistakable, but she could barely hold it together as she fought to save the little girl she loved so much. When the paramedics arrived at the house on Metal Arc Lane in Ripley, West Virginia, They were met with a scene that no one could have prepared for. Amanda stood on the porch, clutching her bloodied daughter in her arms, her face a mask of terror and disbelief. The medics immediately took Emmalee from Amanda, rushing her inside to begin treatment. But as the officers turned their attention to Benji, they quickly noticed something strange. They asked him to lift his shirt, and beneath it, a large bloodstain was clearly visible. Benji, nervously fumbling for words, muttered to the officers that he must have gotten dirty when he picked Emmalee up. But the officers weren't convinced. Their trained eyes quickly caught another disturbing detail: blood on Benji's thigh, unmistakably from the child. Emmalee was rushed to the hospital in Charleston in critical condition, but despite the valiant efforts of the medical team, it quickly became clear that her injuries were far too severe. Doctors soon declared her brain dead. The world, which had once been full of hope and love, now seemed to crumble around Amanda. 2 days later, on October 5th, Amanda made the gut-wrenching decision to turn off the life support machines that were keeping her daughter alive. With a broken heart, she watched as Emmalee was officially pronounced dead. The paramedics later told the authorities that Emmalee's injuries were likely inflicted hours before the emergency crew was called, making the tragic truth even more haunting. Emmalee had suffered for far longer than anyone knew. An autopsy was performed on Emmalee's body, and the results were chilling. The medical examiner confirmed that she had suffered severe bleeding, with injuries that pointed to a violent and brutal assault. The nature of the injuries indicated that the violence inflicted upon her was both physical and horrific. The child also had severe head injuries, consistent with being thrown to the floor or struck with something heavy. The doctors concluded that the cause of death was a skull fracture, an injury so severe that it led to her brain shutting down. Benji was quickly arrested and charged with first-degree sexual assault. However, just days later, on October 6th, the charges were upgraded to intentional murder as the true scope of the crime came to light. During his interrogation, Benji Taylor gave a chilling account of what had happened. He claimed that he had carried Emmalee to the basement, but then allegedly lost consciousness. The last thing he remembered, he said, was loading things into the washing machine. He also admitted to having consumed 8 bottles of beer between 2 p.m. and midnight on the day of the incident, and said he had smoked marijuana with Amanda shortly before. But despite his attempts to explain, his story only raised more questions and suspicions. Despite Benji's claims of intoxication, the deputy sheriff who was the first to arrive at the crime scene noted that Benji showed no signs of being under the influence. His behavior didn't match the description of someone who had consumed such a large amount of alcohol. Benji, however, continued to insist that he had lost control of his actions. He told police that he had likely passed out a dozen times, with each episode lasting anywhere from half an hour to as long as 6 hours. But when pressed, he couldn't explain what had happened during those gaps in time. Benji also claimed that he didn't remember washing the blood from the sink, an attempt to cover his tracks. But as investigators continued to dig deeper, it became clear that his story was riddled with lies and contradictions. The cold truth was undeniable. Benji had done nothing to save Emmalee after inflicting those horrific injuries on her. Instead, he focused on hiding the evidence of his actions. The tragedy of it all was that he had taken no steps to help the child he had so brutally attacked. Further examination of Benji's phone revealed another disturbing detail. Between 2:52 a.m. and 3:17 a.m., just hours before Amanda found him with Emmalee, Benji had been searching for legal pornography. It painted a chilling picture of his true state of mind that night. As investigators continued to examine Benji's phone, they uncovered another crucial detail. At 4:54 a.m., just moments before the ambulance arrived at the scene, Benji made a 9-second outgoing call to a number labeled home. The timing was chilling. 6 minutes later, paramedics were at the house, but it was clear that Benji had already taken steps to cover his tracks. Afterward, Benji received a text from his brother, asking if everything was okay. Benji replied with a message that sent a shiver down the investigators' spines. "I'm in deep shit, bro, but don't sweat it. I'm gonna croak soon." This response revealed the chilling nature of his mindset, as though the gravity of the situation was a distant concern to him. Meanwhile, in the basement, investigators found numerous bloodstains on the bedding and clothing, further proving that the attack on Emmalee was even more brutal than they had initially imagined. With mounting evidence, investigators obtained a search warrant to seize the clothes Benji was wearing that night, as well as a DNA sample. He was being held at the South Central Regional Jail, and the court set bail at an astounding $2 million. Public outrage was growing rapidly, and on October 5, 2016, a petition demanding that Benjamin Taylor be publicly hanged was sent to the federal government. The petition garnered thousands of signatures, a reflection of the anger and horror the community felt over what had been done to Emmalee. But despite the overwhelming support for the petition, it was eventually taken down. Nearly 3 years later, in March 2019, the case finally went to trial. The process lasted 5 long days, with the courtroom filled with emotions, as the brutal details of the crime were laid bare. During the trial, Benji sat in a bulletproof vest, helmet, and handcuffs, a clear reminder of the severity of his crimes. As the proceedings unfolded, a surprising amount of character references were made in his defense, many from people who knew him in more personal contexts. Among those who spoke on Benji's behalf were his longtime friend, his brother's girlfriend, and even the mother of his own son. These witnesses testified to his positive influence on their lives, painting a picture of a man who, in their eyes, had never shown signs of aggression or inappropriate behavior. Benji's brother's girlfriend claimed that he had been a supportive friend during her pregnancy and her partner's health struggles. She said he had a positive impact on her son and had never behaved sexually or aggressively around her. Brenna Garnes, the mother of Benji's son, spoke similarly, stating that Benji often played with her daughter, and she had no complaints about his treatment of children. Despite his quiet demeanor when drinking, she had never imagined he could commit such a crime. Benji's father also testified, proudly declaring that despite everything, he was still proud of his son. He claimed that Benji had never been cruel or sexually perverse. His father even recalled how, when he rushed to Amanda's house on the morning of October 3, 2016, Amanda had remained calm and composed, contrary to the accounts of the police and paramedics who had described her as extremely upset and hysterical. During the trial, a recording was played in court, capturing the haunting sound of Amanda screaming and sobbing uncontrollably at the hospital. Her cries echoed through the courtroom, a chilling reminder of the horror that had unfolded just hours earlier. Yet, despite the overwhelming evidence of Amanda's anguish, Benji's mother, Rita Taylor, audibly dismissed her grief, claiming Amanda was merely pretending to be hysterical. Benji's brother, Zachary Taylor, didn't have much to say, but he did note that Benji had been a positive influence on his sons. He insisted that he could never believe his brother capable of the crime he was accused of. Rita shared stories of Benji's kindness and how he had always been caring toward his son, nephew, and other children in the family. However, she also admitted to 3 previous incidents where Benji had been under the influence of drugs or alcohol, lying still and unresponsive. Despite this, she continued to insist that her son would never do what he was accused of. On the morning of October 3rd, Benji had called his mother, telling her he loved her before abruptly hanging up. The prosecutor raised a pointed question. If Benji had truly come to his senses and found an injured child in his arms, would he have called 911? Rita responded in the affirmative. But if that were the case, why did no one call for help until Amanda discovered the nightmare downstairs? Then, another crucial piece of evidence emerged. An audio recording of Benji talking to someone on the phone while he was already behind bars. The chilling conversation was played in court, raising more questions about his behavior and his awareness of the situation. One of the most damning pieces of evidence came in the form of a recorded phone conversation between Benji and an unknown person, where he claimed that he didn't realize the child was bleeding until someone else told him. Yet, this shocking statement contradicted his behavior earlier that night. In another recording, Benji shockingly admitted to his interlocutor, "I'm not afraid to take punishment for what I did." But in his testimony, he tried to justify his actions, claiming he was simply trying to establish a relationship with little Emmalee. He went as far as to say that he had serious intentions to marry Amanda and start a new family. He even described how, whenever he entered Emilee's room, she would always greet him with her charming smile. The prosecutor pressed him, asking whether it would be uncharacteristic of him to joke about hurting someone during sex. Benji answered, "Yes, I would never allow myself to do that." But the prosecution wasn't done yet. They presented Benji with screenshots of his own Facebook posts. Among them were several memes mocking and trivializing the topic of pain and sex. And in June, Benji himself had posted a statement that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. "I will never apologize for being a sex freak." This phrase was so significant to him that he made it the cover of his profile. Forensic experts had found numerous blood traces on the bedding and floor in the basement, further confirming the horrific nature of the crime. Blood was found in Emilee's diaper, along with possible traces of male semen. Similar findings were discovered during an examination of her genitals for signs of sexual abuse. Traces of biological fluids consistent with those of a male were also found on the pants Benji had been wearing that night. The defense called Barbara Kay, Amanda's former neighbor, to testify. Kay, who lived nearby at the time of the tragedy, shared a wall with Amanda's house. On the night Emmalee was attacked, Barbara had already gone to bed when, around 12:30 a.m., she was awakened by the sound of a child crying and screaming desperately from behind the wall. Kay quickly got up, intending to call the police, but the screams abruptly stopped. She then assumed nothing serious had occurred and returned to bed. Throughout the trial, Benji's lawyer repeatedly claimed that the accusations against him were completely unfounded. The defense argued that the police should have considered other potential suspects and not focused solely on Benji. However, after just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Benjamin Taylor guilty of intentional murder, child abuse resulting in death, and sexual abuse by a guardian. He was sentenced to life in prison for the intentional murder of Emmalee. For the death of a child as a result of abuse, he was sentenced to 40 years behind bars, and for sexual abuse of a child under his care from 10 to 20 years in prison, plus a fine of $5,000. He will serve these sentences consecutively, one after the other. Interestingly, for the first time during the entire trial, Benjamin Taylor finally showed some emotion. All this time he had been staring glumly in front of him, never once paying attention to the chilling evidence being shown on the large screen in the courtroom. He didn't shed a single tear, even when the horrifying photos of little Emilee's battered body were shown. But immediately after the announcement of the sentence, Benjamin Taylor suddenly burst into tears. Guilty of killing a child as a result of abuse, as stated in count 3 of the indictment, and also of sexual abuse by a guardian. I wonder if the jury's decision was unanimous. Family members present in the courtroom expressed that they finally felt justice had been served for little Emmalee. However, the defendant's attorney announced plans to file an appeal, claiming that the jury had not fully considered some crucial evidence. In April 2017, Governor Jim Justice signed Emmalee's Law, which significantly increased criminal penalties for child abuse resulting in death. This law was named in honor of the young girl who tragically lost her life. On the evening of Friday, October 7, 2016, a large crowd gathered in Pasadena, Maryland, to remember Emmalee Barringer and light candles in her honor. Representatives from several local communities came to show their support and love for the victim's family. Emmalee's relatives wore T-shirts emblazoned with her photo, and though they requested privacy, they expressed heartfelt gratitude to everyone who showed sympathy and solidarity. Emmalee Barringer was laid to rest on Sunday, October 16, 2016, at the Macaulay Poloniak Funeral Home in Pasadena. Thank you for listening to her heartbreaking story from start to finish. This case is nothing short of horrific, a true nightmare. I can't fully comprehend it. This is the most despicable form of cruelty, perpetrated by someone capable of such inhuman and perverted abuse against an innocent, helpless baby. Benji concealed his true vile nature so expertly that everyone around him believed he was a respectable person. Even the witnesses who provided character references in court were convinced he was a good man. It's incredibly hard to wrap my mind around it. Poor little Emmalee endured one of the most painful and horrific deaths imaginable. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Your support means everything. See you soon in my next investigation.